G'day legends, I hope you're all fantastic. Welcome to another installment of Monday Q&A. I hope you all had a fantastic weekend full of loud, greasy guitar noises. As always, this Q&A is powered by the amazing people who support me over on Patreon. If you'd like to sign up and get access to some exclusive content, my Patreon is linked in the video description, along with the music that I make with my band Ragdoll, my Discord server, and some other fun free stuff. If you'd like to submit a question for the next Q&A, drop it in the comments section below, but we're going to start with a bunch of questions from my fantastic patrons, starting with one from Shep. Shep is in the market for a sweet new Les Paul, and he wanted to know my specific thoughts about heritage guitars. I've played a few heritages over the years. The most recent one was a pretty amazing one made out of African limber and figured maple. It's got a whole bunch of extra switching going on. It actually belongs to my uncle now, so maybe I should hit him up and borrow it for a week or two and make some videos with it. But that thing is absolutely amazing. The build quality is definitely on par with some of the later era Hamer and PRS stuff that I've got in my collection. One of those things where it's kind of hard to fault it. It all just kind of comes down to taste. And I've also tried out, and I kind of regret not buying it at the time, back at Jackson's Rare Guitars when I bought my Hamer Standard. They had a bunch of heritage stuff, including a beautiful Black Beauty style guitar, and the price at the time was pretty ridiculous. I don't think you could get one for anywhere close to that price now, but that one sometimes haunts my dreams. Overall, like any guitar, but I think particularly Les Paul style guitars, you have to go and play a bunch of them, and you've got that unquantifiable vibe aspect with it. I know some people, just looking at the headstock, it has to look like a Gibson headstock and it has to say Gibson on it for them to really get that vibe. You know, you could argue that that's just purely a psychological thing, and it probably is, but you know, guitars are more than the sum of their parts, and they definitely kind of play into all our inherent biases and quirks of our psychology. So I would say that if you're in the market for a really good Les Paul style guitar, the heritage stuff is definitely worth looking at. Obviously, you've got all the kind of custom shop Gibson things out there. I've played some which are truly spectacular and some where I'm like, it's totally fine. You've also got the more modern PRS style stuff like the 594s, which are immaculate guitars. I would probably never buy a Les Paul sight unseen. I'm pretty comfortable buying a PRS sight unseen. I've done it loads of times now, and their quality control is very, very consistent. And again, quality control doesn't mean a single instrument being good or bad, because I've had people, actually lots of people tell me, hey, you know, I've got a Gibson and it's great. The quality control is awesome. Now, that's not really what quality control means. It's a batch kind of thing. So if you've got some guitars which are absolutely awesome and some which are absolute turds, that normally means the QC isn't as good. I'm not too sure what Heritage's QC is, but at the end of the day, you're gonna buy a single guitar and play it. Play as many as you can before you make a decision. This one comes from patron Freddie. He wants to know how I blocked the bridge on my PRS SE DGT. It is super scientific, Freddie. Just kind of have a look at that once it focuses in. I haven't really done a block on this. I don't know what you want to call this, if you call it blocking it or decking it, but pretty much what I did, let's get the glare off there, is I just tightened up the springs. Well, I tightened up the screws which control the claw, which holds the springs on there, until the bridge basically kind of sat flush. And I know the string angle there isn't optimal, and a bunch of people will weigh in and say, hey, there's actually better ways to do this. But what I like about this is if I loosen the springs, I can get the trem back. And to be perfectly honest, I haven't broken any strings on this yet. I've done a bunch of gigs with it, and it's performed really, really well with the block bridge, both in standard and in drop C, like we play in Ragdoll. And, you know, that will probably get you there. You could probably take it to someone to set it up properly, but this is how I've blocked all the trems on my PRS stuff, and it's usually served me totally fine on there. I've also, I don't know if you can kind of see that on there, I've got some foam underneath the springs to kind of take out that acoustic ringing. I know some people like that. It's almost kind of like a little bit of reverb in there, but personally, I like it to sound as dead as possible in that back cavity. So yeah, you know, I'm not a doctor. Don't listen to what I have to say with this, but I've found it works totally fine on this particular guitar and my other PRS. This next one comes from Barney. They want to know some tips and tricks for dialing in a sweet lead tone on a multi-watt dual rectifier. That is actually probably the Recto I have the least amount of experience with. The Gear Podcast co-host, Mr. Troy Nababan, has an awesome 3-channel Recto, and we actually just did a podcast episode, which is going to come out this weekend, talking about rectifiers, and Troy's pretty much got all the different modes on the 3-channel dialed in really nicely. He's got some tips in that video, but what I would say is when you're going for a lead tone in general, think about what you want it to do. Do you want it to be hyper aggressive sounding and to be a real character kind of tone, the sort of thing where people turn around and go, oh, that is nasty, but it works? Or do you want, I think what a lot of people would consider a nice lead tone, in which case you want a lot of mid-range in there. You can do the Holdsworth trick on a Recto where you basically turn the treble all the way down and you use the mid control and the presence control as kind of like dual mid-range controls on there. So you basically pump the mids all the way up, and then the presence is going to control the amount of sizzle in there. That way you get a lovely smooth lead sound. And on a multi-bot with multiple channels, you can have the other channel set up for your chugga tight rhythm sound on there. And you can even try one of the lower gain modes on there. I think the multi-bots have like a raw mode and a vintage mode on there. I know on my Rev G, the vintage mode gives me a really, really cool blues tone. So that would be my advice there, is like start with the mid-range all the way up and the treble all the way down. Use lots of gain, because lead sounds always sound better with lots of gain and compression, which Rectos always have on tap. And then, you know, maybe turn the mids down a little bit and the treble up and use that presence control on there. This one comes from friend of the channel and patron Roy. What's my favorite album between Deep Purple in rock and the first Led Zeppelin album, and why is it in rock? Ian Pace is the reason it's in rock in this case. I think Ian's drumming in the kind of pantheon of great classic rock drummers is massively overlooked, and I'm a massive Bonham fan. How can you not be a massive fan of what John Bonham did? But for me, the Zepp that I like really kind of starts around 4. And then we get into Houses of the Holy and we get into Physical Graffiti. That to me is the Zeppelin I absolutely adore. I can totally dig Led Zeppelin 2 and Led Zeppelin 3 as well, but Led Zeppelin 1, I appreciate its impact and I appreciate that they were able to pull that album together so quickly. But Deep Purple's in rock is much more of a, let's say, forward-thinking rock album, in my opinion, versus Led Zeppelin 1 being really, really loud, electric British blues. And if you listen to In Rock, like what Pacey's doing on there is just phenomenal. And yeah, you only kind of have to listen to Speed King to just hear that, oh, heavy metal is going to be this thing that everybody's going to be into for the rest of the decade. Whereas I feel like Zeppelin really hit their straps on the kind of mid-career stuff. And I do understand that Physical Graffiti was kind of pulled together from stuff that they did around 4 and 3 and that whole era in there. But yeah, I would choose In Rock as well. Let me know in the comment section below. I mean, these kind of questions are silly. Or why not both? Why not just enjoy the entire Led Zeppelin back catalogue and the entire Deep Purple back catalogue, because they're both amazing. But yeah, thought experiment. You're stuck on a desert island for a week. Let's not say for the rest of your life, but you can only take one album. It's going to be one, or is it going to be In Rock? This next one comes from Peter Harvin, who is a long-time subscriber and a serial commenter. Peter, I just have to say, I always look forward to reading your comments and your thoughts on my YouTube videos. They are always really well considered. And to me, you are an absolute case study in how to behave on the internet. It's always such a pleasure interacting with you. And hopefully one day we can actually meet up, have a coffee, and chat about all these wonderful guitar things. But Peter wants to know, out of all the new modelers that have been released recently, which one has impressed me the most? I actually kind of made a list on here of modelers I've demoed on the channel recently. So the first one's kind of contentious. Is it a modeler or not? The Friedman IRX. It's an analog tube front end and a digital back end. I've kind of talked about that one before. I think that's a modeler for people who don't want to buy a modeler on there. Really easy to dial in. Everything on it just kind of works out of the box. You can load your own IRs, and I've done a few videos with that one. Solid choice, in my opinion. I've done the Fender ToneMaster Pro, the Mua Prime P2, the Nuex Trident, the Saint Rock Amperium, and the Hot Tone Ampero Mini, and the new Ampero Stage 2. I think if I was going to pick 2 out of those, the Saint Rock Amperium and the Hot Tone Ampero Stage are the ones that impress me the most. The Amperium, one, it's built in Ukraine, which is in the middle of a war. So the fact that these guys are able to actually produce these units, I have nothing but respect for. It's absolutely mind-boggling that they're able to do this stuff with existential threats hanging over their heads, and they are a company I want to give a shout out because they're making an excellent product. The selection of amp models and effects in there is really, really good, and they've got some really rare boutique amp models in there. There's stuff like the Driftwood Purple Nightmare, which isn't in any other modeling product. I think their power amp modeling sounds fantastic. Their Marshall models sound fantastic. In terms of amp modeling, it really punches way above its price point. Furthermore, there's neural network-based capturing in there. I did a video with the Amperium and kind of called it the Tone X killer in there for that reason. The fact that you can capture your amps and load them in there is fantastic, and it is a lot cheaper than something like a Quad Cortex, for example. Nothing against the Cortex. I think it's a fantastic unit. Going to be having lots of videos with that one coming up. But yeah, the Amperium, for the price point and the feature set, while it may not be the easiest to use on the physical hardware, the fact it's got a Bluetooth connection, an app, and a software editor really kind of makes it a unique device. And I think if you're someone who doesn't want to pay big money for a modeler, but you still want some fantastic tones, that one is a real standout. The other one is the Hot Tone Ampero Stage 2. It basically sells at the same price point as a Line 6 HX Stomp. Again, another unit that I absolutely love. The Stomp is one of the best pedals that's probably been put out ever, but the fact that the Ampero 2 series has a really good touchscreen that's kind of easier to use, and I find the touchscreen a lot more responsive than some of the other touchscreens out there, and the way it actually allocates physical space rather than just going for skeuomorphic stuff like on the Tone Master Pro, they've just made it easy to use as a touchscreen. Furthermore, the amp and effect list is really good. In particular, the modulations, the delays, and the reverbs on that are really, really impressive. Some of the delays in there, you've got a 2290, you've kind of got these lexicon-style circular and pan delays, and what I'm guessing is like either a Korg or a Roland rack-inspired delays. They sound really, really good. You can assign the foot switches to pretty much anything you want, and there are scenes on there. And again, for the money, if you want to get into the modeling ecosystem with something that's going to give you all the options of the big boys, but not pay big money, I think that one kind of gets it right, in my opinion. I'm just very impressed with what they've been able to deliver at that price point where it feels like a premium device, but again, it doesn't have the premium price tag. But I'd like to know from everybody else, what's impressed them in the modeling world, like outside of, let's say, the big guns like Fractal, Line 6, Neural, and Kemper. What's impressed you, and what should I check out on the channel? One last question for this week. This one comes from friend of the channel and long-standing supporter, Rutger. You can see the Lego set right above my thumb just there. On that note, what is my favorite Lego set? I'm going to divide this into two eras. Leon as a child playing with Lego, and Leon as an adult playing with Lego, because a couple of years ago, I kind of really got back into it. I pulled out all my old Lego. My wife and I went through and categorized it all by color and shape, and it is all fully organized now. I went and rebuilt a bunch of sets. For me, I really, really liked the pirate theme as a kid, and I loved the space theme, in particular, the Space Police theme. So I've got a few Space Police sets from my childhood. They had that kind of, what was it, the like Galactic Invader or something like that, that was really, really cool. They had a whole bunch of other stuff around that, but I was lucky enough to have, here it was called the Black Skull. I forget what it was called in other countries, but the big pirate ship with the black sails, that was just the best Christmas when I got that one, and I spent many an hour putting that one together and kind of playing around with it. I was a little maniac with my Lego. I would build it exactly like the set. I had shelves as a kid. My friends would come over and be like, let's play with some Lego. And I'd be like, you're not touching that. I've got a box of random stuff we can play with, but the sets that are built, you're not allowed to touch. And then, you get a mate like, I'm going to touch your Lego, bro. What are you going to do about it? Like a lot of kids, once you become a teenager and you get into music and guitars and skateboarding, kind of my Lego got pushed to the side. But then in my late 20s, I remembered that I had a bunch of Lego. I was watching Lego builds on YouTube and just going, I've got some of this stuff. Maybe I should rebuy some of it. And then you look at the used prices and your eyeballs kind of expand. It's kind of like vintage guitars or old rack gear or old crusty pedals from the 90s. All that stuff has become inflated. by people who were born during that era who want to relive their childhood. Does this sound like a familiar theme at all? But as an adult, I've been super fortunate to be given some Lego sets as gifts from family members, which are really, really amazing. The Millennium Falcon is incredible. That was such a great build, but I think my favorite one is the Pirates of Barracuda Bay. So it's kind of based on the pirate ship they had in the late 80s, early 90s with the red sails, the Black Seas Barracuda, which my best friend in primary school had. He had that ship, I had the Black Skull. Often we'd like get together and be like, oh, let's have a pirate battle. We were both as kind of crazy as like, don't touch my stuff. So yeah, I had an interesting childhood, but the Pirates of Barracuda Bay, you can build it as a pirate ship, or you can kind of do it as this like broken up island. And I've actually got a build video on my channel with that one if you want to check it out. It's an amazing set. And look, I think Lego are kind of like, I don't know, what would I compare them to when it comes to guitar companies? They're sort of like Fender. Like, you know, Fender are always doing these vintage reissues where you've got the Fender custom shop and the really expensive stuff, but then they do their like made in Mexico, made in Japan stuff where it gives you the feel of using Lego as a child, but it's at an affordable price for an adult in their 20s, 30s, or 40s. And there's just a few things which have been changed and streamlined. So yeah, I don't trust anyone who doesn't like Lego. And it's kind of like not trusting anyone who doesn't like a dual rectifier or a JCM 800. It's classic stuff. It's embedded in my brain from my childhood. And it just makes me feel good. It's like one of my few hobbies outside of music that I can just kind of zone out and really, really enjoy. And building sets with my wife has been super, super fun. It's really, really nice time spent together. Having said that, I know there's a bunch of Lego fans in the comment section below. What did you guys have as kids and what have you been building as adults? Because there is some sick stuff out there now. All right, guys, that is it for this week's Q&A. Thank you to all my amazing patrons for submitting their questions on here. Again, if you'd like to sign up, links in the video description, and you can check out some of the music that I make with my band Ragdoll. We're actually going to be in Melbourne February 16th for Glam Fest. We're playing with Slaughter, Lynch Mob, and a bunch of other awesome bands. I'm super excited about that one. Have a great week.